Greetings and welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. The moon swells to fullness just before 11 a.m. EST on December 3rd in a complicated array of intertwining rulership relations. All of the planets in Sagittarius, Venus, Saturn conjunct retrograde Mercury, and the Sun, while the moon opposes the Sun from Gemini, which our retrograde Mercury rules, while the luminaries square Neptune and Jupiter sign of Pisces, Jupiter being trine Neptune from Scorpio, and it is this scorpionic Jupiter that hosts the group in Sagittarius and Neptune to boot. Clearly, it is a scorpionic Jupiter at the base of this inverted pyramid, and the moon that has swollen to fullness rises in the night, but really descends down into matter as she is led by Mercury tight to Saturn and moving in reverse motion. Deep and intimate transformational philosophical coherence in harmony with fantasy and dream, or perhaps photography and illusion. This is stressed by Mercury's retrograde motion, the what must be done details to finish elongated sequences reversed by or returned or suddenly revealed information that had been buried or hidden. The Geminiic moon is overbrimming with impressions of curious information and how such facts should be felt about, being pulled two directions at once for multivalent emotions of endgame information, such as, this photo means I must condemn someone I love, etc. This is hard on the luminaries. Mind and emotion and soul intention suffer from coherence of the illusion. If the illusion is to be understood, it means the vision of the world previous is false. With Saturn so close to Mercury, it may be some information confidential or restricted, maybe a matter of an abundant awareness of damning information withheld. The fantasy agenda was pushed so hard it slipped through the wall of sleep and into office hours. This can happen with fantasies that become obsessions. The photo you saw of yourself arm in arm with the object of your desire that gets passed around by the paparazzi, but you were not there, even though you wanted to be. You wouldn't have, but now the picture is proof of the affair, and the illicit details follow. It doesn't matter if you did or you didn't. The dream simply became too real, the desire too strong. Something slipped through your psyche and into causality. And Luna looms like a lens in which is reflected the specters we thin match flames in cold steel blue upon wooden spindles turned by time. This particular notch in the rod, old gray wood, looks different than it did when we were not around to see, and so have to trust what photographs have been left behind. I recently asked my grandmother if it looked different when she was young. Of course, she replied. We dressed nice back then, etc., etc. And I said, no, I mean reality itself. She thought for a second and added, yeah, a little bit, it did look different. So depending on which part of this array your planets are pinged may involve you in a different part of the drama. Though if we pull the lunation itself out of the scene in which it's set, it may at least feel like a conflict of choice that leaves you simultaneously frenetic and melancholy. Maybe the way one feels towards the tail end of a serial binge. But as previously stated, this array combines what you see on the screen and what is in your dreams. Those you immerse in while asleep, and those that rest on chin, on palm, and doldrum projections into possible fates. And somewhere in between, you're tipped off that there is a clue that changes the game by melting its mechanics. Mousetrap of wax beheld where snake and ladder shafts are elastic hierarchies that infect us with new cultural aesthetics. Where was the letter dropped? At what stage of play? And we search and stab at this or that phrase as we might in lunar light of divinations that fret us more than before we posed our questions. The lunation takes place in the sixth lunar mansion, Althea, Alchaya, or Alhana. Both Agrippa and Picatrix mention its benefit to hunting in the country and its thwarting of medicines. We might remember that this is a moon cycle begun in Scorpio, the sign of predatory desire and poison. The trigon lord of the decan, which hosts the moon at full, is Mars, yet the ruler of this decan by the Chaldean order is Venus. Indeed, this decan is about both separation and combination, and this is paralleled in the issues of the greater array, the severance caused by the mingling of fact and fantasy. This is not necessarily the loss of rationality derived from swallowing lies, but the victory of subjectivity over objectivity. Someone's experience being more important than the technical facts. The nocturnal holding sway over the diurnal, what seems to be champions over what clearly is. This current flows a bit both ways, and in the moiré a third vision emerges, but this is only held by the few, as in miracle. Perception of that subtle is rarely seen by the masses, although this dual vision may reveal itself to more than just the usual pairs of eyes, this time. Hopping back about 24 degrees to the Yodish Nakshatra, we come to Rohini, which speaks of the unseen processes that go on behind the scenes of reality to make manifestation firm enough for us to believe the illusion. Considering Rohini's consort, Rohit, who is red, and achieves this substantiating of reality by being the blood through which vitality is maintained. Hopping back to tropical from sidereal, we see this as in Gemini, an air sign, and by humoric theory, sanguine, which is the humor of the blood, and the meta-humor that moves all the other humors around. Sanguinity inclines itself to culture, charm, and elan. In Libra, the culture of society and the arts. In Aquarius, the culture of science and innovation, and in Gemini, the culture of ideas and media. Rohini leads the soul into the world to experience all its pleasures and attachments and drunkenness. Similarly, Gemini's influence is to cause curiosity to the point of being utterly lost and scattered in confusion, going this way and that after the sparkle of interests. In India, Rohini also symbolizes first menstruation. In our comparison, it is a waking up to sanguinity, a realizing and gaining awareness of what blood pumps and circulates behind the curtain. That maybe our dreams are connected to our fates, and maybe our use of language and movement do have a subtle correspondence to what manifests around us. And all this vicious business we've been through is not at the hands of monsters or men, but the sentient subtext that hangs over the syntax and lingo and lexicon of the monoculture. And at the level of our loins, there's a fire of change, where the synapse fires like crooked lightning within our gray matter, comes a surging static skeleton that glistens with plasma and pulsates with script. That above in the brain is a switchboard wired to the instincts of love and lust and death and wrath and rapture. That when our dreams walk into the light of day, and night and sunlight swirl and mingle like balsamic and oil, even if these visions be nightmares, and especially when they are. They may be the leg and breast and haunches of our horses, above which rise the trunks and napes and arms and crowns of those who carry bows, sinewed tight and ready for what bouquets of poison quills, collected in side-slung satchels, from which are silver missiles and ebony darts. Or the sun disgorged up from a well, finally released to those that prostrate to the earth in equal tide and tender, to those that veil themselves, inspect the hot hours hidden in caves. All this, an irritating loss of boundary between life and illusion, a fork in the road, our own fantasy, or the lies we are given. We only have one blood, and it shan't be wasted boiling in a false crucible when it could be distilled by the subtlety of our own enchantment. With the moon sweeping to full in the territory of Aldebaran, we may be feeling like honoring our sacred contracts. This is probably one stabilizing factor in a not wholly negative but conflicted array. A lunation that begins with the poisons and desirous indulgences of Scorpio and ends in possible information overload is not dissimilar to the ingestion of a sacred entheogen. You are healed by your hallucinatory and disassociative journey, but in the way that you recalibrate life, you frame the world differently. You have a more integrated and expanded idea of how your body exists in reality. This generally occurs by receiving an overload of visions, ideas, and sensations, that essentially fry or jam your circuitry, requiring that you make new connections. Receiving the starfire of Aldebaran, the moon might make us feel like going through for what our souls signed up for despite the maximalist barrage. A full moon is always in opposition with the sun. Vision and emotion, mind and spirit on either end of a leveling, hopefully, seesaw. The sun here near Antares could fix our intentions on our obsessions, again readying ourselves to endure the ordeal that transforms us. Bernadette Brady mentions behind-the-scenes power games, and this reminds us that across the zodiac, Rohini is perhaps lifting the veil so that we see the mechanics beneath. This is spoken of in various magical, mystical, and plant medicine traditions. And being Sagittarius season, we might be especially open to the alien and exotic. Jupiter being newly oriental, as is Mars, Scorpio's ruler, and is this configuration near the star a crux, especially attempts to make these experiences of dream ordeal, hallucination, and obsession with sacred contract fulfillment and initiation of productive materialization. He wants us to walk away turned on to a grounding and growing philosophy. The place that probably hurts most is our logical communications and sense of structure. Not surprisingly, those are the first things to go out the window in a hallucinatory and frightful ordeal. Mercury retrograde conjunct Saturn is close to fixed star Acumen, the tip of the scorpion's tail, and stings with poison, which if it doesn't kill, corrodes its target over time. It may be a long sought and fought after goal or lifelong philosophy lived by, must die, in light of reversals and revelations of new information. Quitting old habits and shedding skins has certainly been the name of the game in this round of Scorpio, and on this moon we might get the final tail shake and start seeing the results of the hit. This is the peak of the trip. The moon, newly waning but still very bright, just beginning her period of reflection, maybe not saying what happened, but what's happening, opposes Mercury retrograde, Saturn pair on December 4th, and we may feel the physical tension and emotional distance this sting inflicts. We may inspect our wound here for the first time, maybe the moment in the trip you first realize you're bleeding and wonder where you're wounded. Luna immediately enters rulership in Cancer from here. Time to nurture, protect, and heal. We start applying bombs and drinking water and seeking warmth and shelter. Our survival instincts kick in. We're coming down. All we know is we need safety and sustenance. The real and deep reflection comes after. But this is a good phase. We've made it. On December 5th, the moon then activates a loose and brief grand trine with Jupiter and Neptune around noon. This may not hit us like a ton of bricks, but those able to and inclined may want to take this time to meditate on the past few weeks and what it's been all about. Let your mind wander, or even your astral body if you'd like. There might be valuable insight to gather out there. Mercury's backward walk brings him back to a partile conjunction with Saturn as they sextile Mars pretty much at the same time throughout most of the day on the 6th. The messenger has to go back from whence he came in the clutches of time. He's stunned and not yet on his feet, but moving, but looking the other way. A carrier pigeon comes out over the distant hills bearing a hot coal clutched in its tiny talons and drops it within eyesight. Smoke signals spring up, describing disturbing events and disorderly conduct. The mirages form into solid structures, balustrades and buttresses, towers and holds, from which emerge slow-moving mimes and mechanical mannequins. They pull scarves from their sleeves and unfurl them into flags. The heraldry is both clear and confusing. Scores must be settled, wrongs righted, communities defended. But maybe we are too far away to reach the battle in time to join it. Our voice is lost in the wind. We fail to warn our neighbors of the attack. Or something we've learned from time, that the law binds us from taking action. We are not allowed to speak with our client outside of court. There may be energy and an impetus to bear arms. Even if the pen is drawn from the sheath instead of the sword, it still requires ink to write. You might have to scrawl so hard you scratch the characters through the page into the desk and etch the stone permanently. Or if you find you cannot get a hold of the utensil at all, then simply use the energy to commit the words to memory. December 9th, early in the morning, Venus enters the second decan of Sagittarius and Mars enters rulership in Scorpio. All the crusading and questing of Sagittarius becomes highly romanticized as Venus enters the middle degrees, including literal romance, that of love and war. Allow yourself to imagine the passionate embraces of romance novel covers to flood into your mind, especially those that feature warrior costume and ancient cities burning in the background. This is Hollywood-style questing, where there's always a leading lady whose entanglement in the epic affairs of the brawny and heroic protagonists lead to sub-theme conquests, which are what many theatergoers came to see in the first place. Obviously, reality is not as generic and gender binary, but when roses bloom in the middle of our missions, we tend to be ready to defend them as much as the tenets we strive for. Expect these two strands of romance to mingle and mix, which is much eulogized after victory, like the dedication that begins an accomplished publication to the author's true love. I couldn't have done it without N. We pause and daydream about the desk-side dragon slain, the tea-stained trials and throes of passion which rolled over scattered manuscript papers, the flowery poetry emerging between the fecund black soil of ink, penetrating the creative voids of the paper, etc., etc. Whatever is your agenda, ready yourself for the airbrushing and glamour shooting as you fulfill your destiny as poster patron of the endeavor, and be prepared to be paired by fate with your picture partner. Mars's ingress into Scorpio dumps the whole vial of number 9 into the cocktail, and the resultant narrative is a love born on the road to hell, where two star-crossed lovers may not make it out alive. You can imagine how gruesome Romeo and Juliet might be if redone today, the psychological thriller series version, or simply the horror slasher version. Perhaps I'm aiming more at Othello or the Scottish play, I'm not sure. But with Scorpio rising, we may more than hunger after desire. We are likely to eliminate everything in our path until we clutch it. Of course, some areas of our lives could use some ruthless nighttime stealth if we are to realize what we want, but it is up to us to make sure we like what we have done once the lights have come back on, or at least that we have hidden our crimes well enough. So there is an element of morality at stake here. How upset will your chart be at itself when it catches you engaging in merciless plots and subterfuge? When there is an assassination on your hands, the red prints on the walls, the rails, the wheel. Restraining these attempts is largely useless, and perhaps more dangerous. They must be channeled. A vicious underground syndicate owes you one. Choose wisely. Put their methods and means to a positive use. Of course, they promise you anything you want, so what you desire most is the first thing that comes to mind. But maybe it should not pass your lips so readily. Try to remember your most noble desire. For this, you may have to check in with your higher and perfected self. This is typically part of the martial tempering program, to make sure that the physical training you achieve doesn't simply make you a killing machine, that you also are of highest possible mind and spirit. Sagittarius season will definitely infect you with philosophy and drive to achieve heights of ideal, but the aforementioned romantic context of Venus may want to let the beauty of the pursuance extend to the libidinous, and we may more than anoint wounds with our lips, but also kiss with blades and sink our teeth into what we embrace. Don't underestimate violence with Mars here. Instead, learn to respect it. Learn that there are things that are sharp and dangerous, and that poisons should be approached with reverence, even when the intent is to imbibe. All right, welcome back, Bonnie.
Hello. Hello, everyone out there. Good afternoon or evening, depending on which show you caught us at. We have two lovely guests this afternoon / evening.
Yes, Christopher is back. CF is back in the studio.
Hi.
mixing sound live for us and hanging out. And also, we have Lily. Interesting week coming up.
Yes, of course. It's always interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this one begins with the full moon. So.
Yeah, today, the full moon. What time does that happen?
It happens at 11 a.m.
So an hour, right as the show ends. Oh, excuse me, right an hour before the show begins.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot because it's, it always comes up, because on calendars it's always going to say full moon, more or less the day after it occurs. So everyone is going to be doing their full moon thing or their new moon thing, usually after the moon's already waning or waxing, depending on which one you're shooting for. So this one you'll definitely get that. So it's going to be really the night of December 2nd, which is, if you're listening to this on the radio, it's
that will be the night that you're going to see it in its fullest. By the evening of December 3rd, the moon will be waning already, and
in this part of the world. And it's quite a complex. I mean, we went over this last week and this week, how we're going to have Saturn conjunct retrograde Mercury in Sagittarius, in late Sagittarius, and Mercury turning retrograde on top of Saturn, and then Venus and the Sun all in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and then you have Jupiter in Scorpio, trine Neptune, and what's that?
Do you want to just give a couple of descriptions of Sagittarius for the listeners so they can understand what all of these planets are?
Yeah, I mean, Sagittarius is really, it's like imagination and motivation. It's kind of it's like questing and crusading, and what you're really going for, like those posters you'd see in like a counselor office that's like, reach for the stars. Yeah, reach for the stars. and then or like with someone doing some insane ski jump, like off some mountain, precipice to their, like what would seem to be to their death, but it's really to their victory and success. But it's Sagittarius consolidates resources and drives at goals towards targets. It's like that's why it's represented by the centaur. It was revolutionary for warriors to learn archery on horseback, and that's where we get the mythological centaur from. It was much feared because it was like synthesizing the ability to ride and the ability to shoot. It's really Sagittarian people will be able to source from here and source for there to drive towards their goals, and especially drive towards their goals like faster. There's an element of movement and quickness to it, but it's also philosophical. It's not driving. Capricorn is very material, and setting up hierarchies and architectures to move towards things that you're attaining an achievement and that sort of accomplishment. But Sagittarius is more, you're always driving at an ideal. Like a really good example of Sagittarian style people maybe is like the heads of fashion houses or something like that, or a film director, where you're always have a big philosophical or semi-spiritual concept, and you're going to go far and wide for it. Sagittarius is also very associated with the exotic and the foreign travel and movement, the vehicle and the target and the ideal and the philosophy behind that ideal. And so when you get all these planets in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, but then you get Jupiter in Scorpio, it's gonna overlay all of that with that scorpionic current. Jupiter's going to be thinking from the perspective of sex, death, ordeals, trauma and learning from trauma, and attaining desires, and going through underworld journeys and ingesting poisons and overindulgence, going too far. It's Mars rules Scorpio, and Mars at this point will be in Libra, in late Libra. So Mars is thinking about defending social equilibrium and defending diplomacy, and he's in detriment in Libra and in rulership in Scorpio. So we'll see that change right at the end of this week, and at that point he becomes much more dangerous. But in Libra, he's kind of either not defending, himself enough, or going way too far. It's kind of like the on-off in defense. Like hearing about all this social injustice and just it driving you crazy inside your head, and you don't say anything, and then you suddenly just blow up. Like Libra is very much social, so it's like you just blow up at a party and make a big speech about everything you think is wrong, and turn the table over, and you're like, it's just not right.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, keep that in mind
at your full moon party.
And so the other interesting thing about this is that Jupiter is in this array is trine to Neptune in Pisces, and he also rules Pisces, while the moon and the sun are square to Neptune. So there's a definite element of illusion and dream, and Neptune has a real connotation for photography and cinema because it's fake reality. It's the illusion of the camera. So there's definitely going to be things, I think, that are going to come up about, we talked about this last week, like photos and footage, acts caught on tape, and because Mercury's retrograde, it's information getting suddenly kicked up and brought to the table, things from before that were hidden and now are seen, and things that were restricted information or confidential information being leaked, and through all of it, not really knowing what's real and what's fake, and your volitional mind, like your sight and your vision, and also your emotions, struggling with that. Like I say in the forecast at some point, that you're like, this photo means that I'm gonna have to condemn someone that I love, like this damning photo, I can't even believe it, but here's the proof, but a photo itself is an illusion, so there's going to be a lot of different layers of that, and this is the blossoming of the Scorpio new moon we had 2 weeks ago. So this is the result of the past, what was incepted before. This is the result of what's been brewing. So we can think back after this, especially in the days after we get, the next day we get, the moon is going to oppose Mercury. Saturn and Mercury, and we'll get to kind of look at how we feel separate from this information, how this information is alienating, and then immediately it goes into Cancer, and we look for shelter. We're like, how do we make ourselves okay, which all sounds very dark, but it can manifest in so many different ways. For some people, actually they'll be like, you could listen to this and then it happens and you're like, oh, that's crazy. That was exactly what the movie I watched that night was about. And that's all that happened, but for some people it's going to be more visceral, and you're always going to see elements of it in the news and in bigger dramas, the dramas of towns, the dramas of groups of people, especially with Mars and Libra.
That brings us to Tuesday.
Are you ready for some psychological drama?
Yes.
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 But do you feel like you've been free of psychological trauma for a minute?
Yeah. I've been in an open field.
That's pretty absolute.
I'm scared of heights, though,
Yeah.
as you know. I don't want to walk the plank.
Right, totally. Well, you seem like you walk the plank, but you don't want to get on the plank and then get on the ladder.
It's a short trip to the cauldron.
Yeah. What do we have next?
On Tuesday, December 5th, a brief and loose grand water trine between the Moon, Neptune, and Jupiter.
Yeah, and this is what I mean about being able to reflect after. And this one's important. What we have the day before and this day is aspects that have to do with the moon. So they're very brief, and they're but you can take advantage of them.
Right, because the moon moves so fast.
Yeah.
So that it's ever changed, or you just can't get too hung up on things that happen with the moon.
Yeah, it'll have a lot to do with your day, but not the trajectory of your life necessarily. I mean, these moon cycles are bigger, and then the way the eclipse cycles play out are, of course, they do a lot of sculpting of your life, but kind of on the subconscious level. But on this day, we get the moon is just going to activate that trine between Jupiter and Neptune, that kind of harmonization of illusion and imagination and dream. And really it feels like a lot of what we're going to get with this full moon is kind of dreams stepping into reality and not being able to really kind of being like, that's so weird, I just dreamt that, and then now this thing is happening that's so similar, or I dreamt exactly that, or I really, really wanted this to happen and it happened, but maybe that isn't the right thing to happen, I think we'll get people experience things like that, their dreams coming true, but it's kind of scary.
Or it could be completely banal.
Yeah, or it can be banal, but there's enough in the layers of this that it's going to be complicated,
And a little eerie. It's always strange when you dream something and then you see it.
Yeah, and I mentioned last
happen
week,
in your day.
It'll probably be like the layers of your life will seem to just be inextricably stuck together. That you're like, oh, like what's happening?
Like a wet phone book.
Yeah, like a wet phone book. Yeah, life will definitely become a wet phone book. Like what's going on at work and what's going on in your dreams and what's going on in your social life and in your art and in your your fantasies and etc. is all just seeming to not really be as easily separated as normally. It's not as cleanly pulled apart. There's leakage going on and mingling, and to kind of that. What day is that? The 6th. Wednesday, December 6th is a day. Is that what I'm talking about?
The 5th.
No, the 5th. Tuesday, December 5th is the day that the moon is going to trine both Neptune and Jupiter at the same time. And Jupiter is like the coherence of the underlying philosophy behind all of this time period. It's and in general, but this, because we have all these planets in Jupiter's sign, especially now, harmonized with the illusions and the dreams and the imagination and the not just imagination, but the inability to separate reality and imagination, that is in harmony with the philosophy. I think I mentioned in the forecast that it's subjectivity winning over objectivity, that people will start to say and think, at least for now, and I think this is going to have a big impact upon the year and upon what this year in history kind of unfolds, is that people's experiences of things are perhaps as important, if not more important, than the technical data. And on the 5th is a good day to meditate deeply, or even, I think I said, if you want to go as far as astrally journey, go for it. That's like a day that's definitely going to be, all the circuitry is there for you to make that happen. Like trines are volitional, and they're like a harmonic, a circuitry that just exists in the aether, and that it could just pass you by. You didn't even notice it was there. The people that are going to notice it and interact with it are people that are just going to stumble upon it or know it's coming up and be able to hop on board.
Perfect. Well timed.
Yeah. Yeah. Take us away.
Interlude, musical interlude. From there we go to Wednesday. Mercury retrograde conjunct Saturn goes partile with Mercury in reverse motion while the pair sextile Mars and Libra.
Yeah, and then this is Mercury.
That's fascinating. You said tough information revealed makes us want to do something, but we are estranged from the conflict by time and or space. So it's so hard to not think of the news and to not think of all the conflicts happening in the news.
Yeah, and that could be in your house too. I mean in your life too. Like you, a relative could call you and say this horrible thing's happening to them, or maybe not horrible,
right.
like tragically horrible, but and you're like, oh my God, if I was there, I would help you with that,
would.
Yeah. But,
At least make you some soup.
yeah. But yeah, it's definitely like you're receiving the information. Mercury's the messenger, Hermes, and he's turning around and meeting up with time and time and structure, Saturn, Chronos, and Saturn is kind of hey, da 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 da. And Mercury's really slow at that point. He hasn't picked up speed yet, but being sextile to Mars is like they're willing to collaborate, and Mars and late Libra, as I said, is concerned with defending universal equilibrium, and Libra also always has like a social dimension. So it's kind of like learning about these disturbances and learning about the feeling of needing to, or the technicality even of needing to do something about it. Like something's got to be done about this. You feel that a lot when you hear things on the news, or you're like, well, something's got to be done. But you're often thinking, well, what can I do? Especially we live very rurally, so we're just look out the window and see
a squirrel running up a tree.
Yeah, and we're like, I don't really know what to do about this oil spill in Japan right now,
or even in the oil spill that just happened.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the nature of this aspect, whether that's going to land. It all depends on where this stuff lands in your chart, where you have Libra, where you have Sagittarius, if it's what kind of themes these are going to be.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like Thursday and Friday are pretty relaxed.
Yeah, stuff's just separating and coming together. I don't really have much to say about Thursday or Friday. We could go on and on about relaxation, I guess, for a while. Christopher, how do you like to relax?
What's my personal way of relaxing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same as anyone,
Oh, yeah.
Hot shower, little alcohol maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Go outside, get some fresh air, stretch a little, run around.
Around. Yeah.
Jump up and down.
Not lay down.
You can lay down,
Mm-hmm.
but if you start sleeping, that's cheating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess sleeping is beyond relaxation.
That's not relaxing.
Yeah.
No.
That's like another job.
Yeah. Yeah, sleeping does become arduous, right?
Well said.
If you're really relaxing, you're awake, but yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it. You're like, I don't know if I relaxed.
Yeah. You don't want to go a bridge too far.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's REM, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's
It's
what I'm saying.
hectic.
That's
Yeah.
punching in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You want to do that.
Yeah.
Time to pay attention.
Just look at the fruit swaying on the tree or whatever. You don't have to pick it.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, totally. What did we say last week? Live your purpose.
Yeah, live your purpose. Live, laugh, love.
I guess that's
Eat. Well, how does it go?
Eat, yeah.
Kill, die.
Yeah, kill,
maim.
die. Yeah,
Yep.
maim. Yeah. Yeah, I guess this is not, relaxation is maybe not living your purpose for a moment.
Yeah. Well, excusing yourself from the table.
Yeah.
I've had enough.
I've had enough.
That's a nice cup of tea. Maybe I'll just have some water. Or
Yeah.
just sit here and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an art in itself.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
You know, I think the rest of this week has a lot of connotation about trying to relax and dodge the pressure, or at least channel the pressure. Because what do we have next? Is that
On December 9th, Venus enters Sag in the second decan.
yeah, and that's really a lot to do with like romance, like like romancing the stone. You know, like the
Was that about romance?
I don't know, but the is I don't know. Is it
I don't know.
bird on a wire?
What? How about A Room with a View? That's romance.
Yeah, but this is like, I mean, this is romance, like the romance
Daniel
of the
Day-Lewis.
Crusade.
Just wanted to say his name on the air.
Like the romantic temperament.
Yeah, the romantic
Mhm.
temperament. But, you know, Venus in
Lord
Sagittarius.
Byron.
Lord Byron, yeah. It's take Lord Byron and Coleridge and Wordsworth and apply it to the big quest, the big motivations in life. You know, what you're ultimately trying to accomplish and everything that you need to do to get ready and motivate everyone that needs to be motivated to accomplish that. You know, it's like your life's work romanticized, and people can get, with Venus there, people can get really caught up in that image. I was saying in the forecast, like it's like the glamour shot of yourself doing what you're doing. You know, like it's like the really idealized, romanticized version of what you're
That sounds
ultimately
lovely.
up to. But it also includes the literal romances that occur along the way.
Mhm.
You know, and that it's like falling in love with what you're doing and falling in love with the people who are in love with what you're doing, and you all falling in love with each other, and defense too. It's like defending what you're doing and defending the people you love who are in line with what you're doing. You know,
Absolutely.
it's like very, very romance novel cover, which I mentioned in the forecast. You know, I think I said like, imagine like.
What would your cover look like?
We're not going to go into that. I don't think that's appropriate for the radio. And then basically at the same time, because that occurs at 3 a.m. in the morning in the east on December 9th, and at 4 a.m. in the morning, Mars enters Scorpio. And so this is finally,
Appropriate music.
Scorpio season is over as far as the sun goes and the planets that stick with the sun, Mercury and Venus, but Mars has finally entered rulership in Scorpio and is going to be there for a while, and it's going to be very much things can become dangerous at that point. I think I say like
Dangerous nocturnal activity.
yeah,
Nocturnal predators.
yeah. I think I was talking about learning to take violence seriously and to give reverence to poisons, and if you're planning on doing something violent or poisonous, and that could be literal or that could be a metaphor, it could be allegorical. If you're going to put that violent energy and that poisonous energy or intake of violence and intake of poison into your life at this time, that it can go a lot further and cut a lot deeper than normally, and that this is definitely a time to apply that to something in your life. And if you know your chart, you can take a look at your chart and see what house Scorpio is in. That'll tell you exactly where that's going to be applied, and probably where else Mars is in your chart. But that some area of your life might need this nocturnal kind of shrouded by darkness assassination, where the lights get turned on and all your enemies have been eliminated, or in this, it doesn't have to be enemies, but obstacles, that you can go in covertly to some part of your life with ruthless and merciless power and resolve, and that with Mars and Scorpio, that's going to be kind of just happening in some part of your life. So you're going to want to figure out how to channel it, how to make that constructive.
How to best use that.
Yeah.
Really think about what needs to be addressed violently.
Yeah, what needs to be addressed violently. Yeah. And what desires need to be like seized at all costs, I talk about, the martial tradition is not just teaching people how to become killing machines physically, but also there's elements of, I don't know if I want to say mysticism, but a high spirit of ideal of almost like Zen mentality, where you're tempering your mind and your body and your spirit, and I mentioned you're not going to want to just grab at your ultimate desire, but you're going to want to grab at your most noble desire. And if you can...
So it takes a moment to be able to understand what that is.
Yeah,
you really have to reflect upon what desire would be your most noble desire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to want to try to keep checking in with that, to keep your objective straight. And then, that all these planets are in Sagittarius, that helps because it's all about targets and high ideals and philosophy. And that's going to naturally incline you to that. But with Venus slipping into the second decan of Sagittarius at the same time, with that romanticism that we were talking about, it's easy for that to allow you to it could get away from you, where the romanticized version of your ultimate philosophical goals is what you're sending all of your, black ops forces at instead of like the concrete reality,
Absolutely.
Which may be great. You might win. You might...
Hopefully you do.
You might destroy all opposition and attain your ultimate romanticized goal. And you'd live one of those highly eulogized, mythologized lifestyles, or, histories, a hagiography. You might become a saint, or a diabolical saint, a diabolical dabbler,
a daemon.
A daemon. You might be notorious and infamous. This would be the time for that, for ultimate infamy. If that's your line of work, then things are going to be in your favor. But if you want to be remembered for some of the good that you do, you're going to want to try to keep things ratcheted to a degree.
Incroyable.
Yeah, incroyable. I think the audio followed that quite well. Christopher, do you feel like some of the music you've been up to is diabolical, nefarious, or articulating some sort of infamy?
Is it like of a negative, destructive character?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, just yeah.
Not generally.
Yeah.
Or trying to see a way through it.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it? But sometimes you go there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Self-expression.
Yeah.
The man in the mirror.
Right. Totally. Whether the mirror is smashed or cracked or.
Even Michael Jackson understood.
Right. Yeah. Have you heard?
There's always room for change.
Have you heard much about the whole man in the mirror thing with Michael Jackson?
I haven't.
That I guess I know little about this, but I've just heard through the grapevine that the Jacksons, the father actually had a mirror in the basement that he would make them go down and talk to the man in the mirror.
Nice.
And there was, he believed in, there was an entity that lived there, and they all had to like communicate with it, and then, so, I mean.
Where is that story from?
Grant Coram.
Oh, well, that's reliable.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's reliable. Yeah.
Who was the man in the mirror
I'm not sure.
in this scenario?
I don't know, but
Who was the entity? Was it a Legua?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know what their tradition was, but I think the listeners should all
Narcissist.
probably narcissist. Yeah, it was highly narcissistic. I think.
Scary.
Yeah, the scariest man in the mirror.
I'm scared.
Yeah. Well, this has been a glorious chat.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're coming down to it.
I can see something down there.
Yeah, what is it?
It's like a ripple of water
Yeah.
at the bottom of the well.
Yeah, but it's kind of like a moray.
There's some oil down there too.
Yeah, there's some oil. Yeah. Yeah, there's some sort of scrying going on.
Yeah, scry baby.
Scry baby. Yeah. Scry me a river. Yeah, moray and moray eel.
That's a moray.
Yeah, that's a moray. Well, I think we better get off the microphone and maybe we'll just let the...
Unless anyone has anything else to say.
Yeah, any final words?
Sheer courage.
Yes.
Sheer courage to you.
Mm.
Do you want to take us out with some sound?
Please, Jenny.
Thank you for listening to Liminal Light. Our theme music was composed by the ever-talented Asa Irons. This week's background sound was created once more live by our guest, the infamous cartoonist and soundist C.F. Christopher Forgues. If you don't know him, look him up. I'm your host, Chris Puchere Rapucci, and you can find me at atavisceral.com, ATAVISCERAL.com, where I post articles and forecasts, offer chart readings, talismanic concoctions, occult services, tarot, divination, and more. Manceratus Daemonium.